I want you to close your eyes for a second. Just picture a map of South Asia.
Okay, a pretty massive area.
Right, massive. Now, mentally, wind the clock back. It is August 1947.
Oh, wow. Okay. A very tense moment in time.
Extremely tense. The British Empire is packing up. I mean, they are leaving the subcontinent after centuries of colonial rule. But in the scenario we're looking at today, history hinges on this one. Crucial, monumental omission.
The line.
Exactly, the line, the Radcliffe line, that infamous boundary that was hastily drawn to carve the subcontinent into separate nations. But in this scenario, it is simply never drawn.
It's just, wow, it's such a wild mental exercise right off the bat.
It really is. The partition never happens.
Yeah.
There is no line severing Punjab in half, no separation of Bengal.
Right.
There's no creation of India and Pakistan as, two completely distinct sovereign states. Instead, what emerges from the end of British rule is just a single united country.
It is an incredibly powerful mental exercise because you are taking one of the most defining, really seismic geopolitical events of the 20th century and simply erasing it from the timeline.
Completely erasing it.
Yeah, and the ripple effects of that single erasure, they don't just change a localized region, they fundamentally rewire the mechanics of the modern world.
And that is exactly what our mission is for this deep dive. We are exploring the fascinating framework laid out in the piece, The Unbroken Map, a unified South Asian history.
Such a great source.
It really is. And we want to figure out what a united subcontinent would actually look like today. Like, how would it function economically? How would it govern itself?
Well, the logistics of it all.
Exactly. But more importantly, what imagining this alternate world can teach you about the profound weight of the choices that shaped the reality we actually live in today.
Because alternate history, it isn't just about playing pretend or, writing historical fan fiction.
Definitely not.
No, it is a highly effective analytical lens. I mean, when you look rigorously at what could have been, you suddenly get a much sharper, much clearer understanding of the hidden architecture and the hidden costs of what actually is.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer physical scale we are dealing with here is staggering. I mean, we're talking about a single nation stretching all the way from the high-altitude mountains of Kashmir down to the coastal beaches of Karachi and across from the arid deserts of Rajasthan all the way to the lush, river-dense landscapes of Bangladesh.
The geography alone is mind-blowing.
It is. And if you look at the demographics today, that singular geographical footprint houses over 1.8 billion people.
Wow.
1.8 billion. Under one flag, you are literally looking at the largest single consumer market, workforce, and electorate on Earth.
The demographic reality alone shifts the entire global center of gravity. I mean, undoubtedly.
Yeah, completely.
But before we can even analyze the modern geopolitical implications of a 1.8 billion person mega-state, we really have to look at the immediate ground-level shift that happens in 1947.
Right.
Because the very first thing that changes in this unbroken timeline isn't economic. It is human.
Right. Let's talk about that human element, because in our actual reality, the 1947 partition triggered what is widely considered one of the largest mass migrations in recorded human history.
Yeah, it was absolutely devastating.
It was. You had somewhere around 15 million people crossing newly mandated borders, Hindus and Sikhs moving east, Muslims moving west.
And it wasn't some orderly, bureaucratic transition?
No, not at all. It was a desperate flight. You had families abandoning ancestral homes. Violence erupted on just an unimaginable scale. And an estimated 1 to 2 million people lost their lives.
An absolute rupture of society.
Totally. So taking that away entirely.
Well, what's fascinating here is how the absence of that single event rewires the sociological baseline of a nation. We often think of history in terms of, treaties and governments and dates.
That's right.
But history is actually carried in the bodies and minds of the people who live it. When you fundamentally remove the violence and the massive displacement of partition from the timeline, entire generations grow up differently.
Yeah.
You are looking at unbroken lineages of families and communities.
And the day-to-day reality of that unbroken lineage, I mean, it is wild to think about. Just imagine a grandfather living in Lahore, which today is in Pakistan.
Okay.
In this alternate world, he could simply wake up and decide to visit his relatives in Delhi.
Just get on a train.
Exactly. No passports, no visas, no heavily militarized checkpoints. I mean, think about how you travel in your own country right now.
Yeah, you don't even think about it.
Right? You get in your car to drive across a state line, or you hop on a train to a neighboring province. You barely even notice you've crossed a boundary.
There's no barbed wire.
No barbed wire, no diplomatic tension. So taking that level of mundane, everyday freedom and applying it to a region that historically experienced so much division, that doesn't just change travel logistics. That has to completely alter the national psyche.
Oh, absolutely. It alters the baseline of social trust because in our reality, the trauma of partition was institutionalized.
Right.
It was passed down generationally. It shaped national identities that were heavily defined by opposition to the other across the border.
Yeah, defined by who you aren't.
Exactly. But without that rupture, the cultural memory is one of continuity rather than catastrophic loss. And mechanically speaking, when a population doesn't have to spend a generation grieving, resettling millions of refugees, and rebuilding burned infrastructure, all of that human and financial capital is instantly freed up.
Wait, I want to pull on that thread.
Oh.
Because you are talking about the transition from social stability directly into economic momentum.
Yes, exactly.
If you aren't spending the 1950s and 60s recovering from a massive societal trauma, you're spending that time industrializing.
Precisely. The energy that would have gone into survival and recovery, well, it goes entirely into state building. Which brings us to the economic engine of this hypothetical nation.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We established this massive, unbroken geography. If you have 1.8 billion interconnected people free to move and collaborate without borders, the economic mechanics become almost terrifyingly efficient.
Oh, they do.
Right now, India and Pakistan operate as completely separate economies with, honestly, very little bilateral trade due to the political friction.
Barely any.
Right. But if you smash them together into one unified regulatory framework, you create a self-sustaining continental economy.
It is the ultimate supply chain dream. I mean, let's look at the actual geography here.
Okay.
You have the massive agricultural surplus of the Indus Valley and Punjab in the north.
Right.
In an undivided subcontinent, that agricultural output flows seamlessly down to feed the exploding high-density technology hubs in the south, places like Bengaluru and Hyderabad.
And they wouldn't just be feeding internal markets either.
Yeah.
Think about the global export mechanics.
Oh, massive.
You would have direct, tariff-free railway and highway connections from the heavy industrial zones right to the coastlines.
Yeah.
You'd have a nation with total maritime dominance over the region. I mean, massive port networks in Karachi on the western seaboard facing the Middle East and Europe.
Right.
And they'd be working in total coordination with the ports in Kolkata and Dhaka on the eastern seaboard facing Southeast Asia.
You are basically describing an economy that is virtually immune to standard global supply chain shocks.
Wow. Yeah, I guess so.
Because the raw materials, the technological innovation, the agricultural base, and the global distribution hubs, they are all internal. They operate with zero international friction.
That's incredible.
And the movement of human capital would be just as fluid. An artificial intelligence engineer from Lahore could seamlessly relocate to a startup incubator in Bengaluru. A maritime logistics expert from Chennai could be assigned to optimize the shipping lanes in Karachi. The talent pool flows exactly to where the market demands it, without a single bureaucratic hurdle.
A closed-loop economic powerhouse. But, it isn't just about spreadsheets and shipping lanes. The cultural compounding effect of this unbroken map is just as massive.
Oh, totally.
Let's talk about the arts. Right now, we have Bollywood in Mumbai producing distinct cinema, and Lollywood, which, for those who might not know, is the historic cinema and arts hub based out of Lahore, operating separately.
Very separately.
Right. In this unified timeline, those industries aren't siloed by a border.
Well, culture thrives on cross-pollination. When you have the poetic traditions of Urdu from the north constantly, frictionlessly interacting with the cinematic infrastructure of the south, you get an explosion of creativity.
The ultimate cultural melting pot.
Exactly. Languages mix deeper. The musical traditions evolve together. You would absolutely see the creation of a unified cultural superpower that would likely dominate global entertainment. And simply by virtue of its massive, diverse domestic audience.
Yeah, I see the utopian appeal of that. I really do. But I have to push back here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because human nature doesn't just hold hands and sing songs forever. We are tribal creatures.
Fair point.
Which brings me to the sports aspect. In our reality, an India versus Pakistan cricket match is one of the most intensely viewed, high-stakes sporting events on the planet.
Oh, it stops the world.
It really does. It is practically a proxy war on a pitch.
Yeah.
But in this alternate reality, that match doesn't exist. You just have one monolithic, practically unbeatable super team sharing a locker room.
I mean, from a purely athletic standpoint, the depth of that international talent pool would be staggering.
Right, they'd literally win everything.
Right.
But if human nature demands competition and that external border rivalry is gone, wouldn't all of that tribalism just fracture internally? Like, the psychological need for a rivalry doesn't just evaporate because the politicians didn't draw a line on a map.
That is an incredibly astute observation. The tribalism doesn't disappear, it simply localizes.
Right, so instead of India versus Pakistan on the world stage, you get absolute, fiercely tribal matches between, say, Punjab and Bengal,
Yes.
or Sindh and Maharashtra. The energy just moves inward.
Exactly. And that inward shift of competitive energy, well, it is the perfect transition to the actual mechanics of governing this mega state.
So what does this all mean for the government? Because I have to hit pause on this utopian vision of seamless supply chains and invincible cricket teams.
It's not all sunshine.
No, because managing 1.8 billion deeply diverse people under one roof sounds like an absolute logistical nightmare. You have dozens of major languages.
Hundreds of dialects.
Yeah. You have wildly different ethnic groups. You have complex, deeply rooted religious majorities in different regions.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, history is fiercely consistent on one rule scale amplifies friction.
Scale amplifies friction.
Right. Let's upgrade the metaphor here. Governing this unbroken subcontinent wouldn't be like a big, happy family living in one house. It would be like a massive, highly volatile corporate merger.
Oh, man.
You are combining distinct entities with different cultures, different priorities, and different historical grievances under one unified board of directors.
And every single department is fighting tooth and nail for the internal budget.
Precisely. How does a unified parliament actually function? How do you frame a constitution that balances the sheer population density of the Gangetic Plains with the massive, resource-rich, but sparsely populated geographical expansiveness of regions like Balochistan or Sindh?
Right, it seems mathematically impossible to keep everyone happy. Like, a policy that subsidizes the tech sector in the South might actively drain resources from the agricultural heartlands in the North.
And without the external pressure of a neighboring rival to unify the population through nationalism, all of that political energy turns inward.
The localized tribalism again.
Exactly. You would likely see intense federalist struggles. States would demand severe autonomy. You might face internal political gridlock on a scale that makes modern democracies look efficient.
Wow.
The struggles of a nation don't vanish because a border wasn't drawn. They just evolve from foreign policy crises into highly combustible domestic policy issues.
It's a massive risk.
Yeah.
But, there is a mathematical counterweight to that risk, and it is arguably the most compelling insight of this entire alternate timeline. It comes down to the mechanics of defense spending.
Yes.
The peace dividend.
The peace dividend is where the counterfactual history becomes mathematically staggering.
Let's break down the reality of our timeline first. Over the last 7+ decades, India and Pakistan have engaged in multiple wars.
Yes.
They have engaged in an intensely expensive nuclear arms race. They maintain massive, highly militarized borders. That requires dedicating an enormous percentage of their respective gross domestic products simply to defending against each other.
It is a phenomenal drain on national wealth. I mean, you are locking up trillions of dollars over decades in standing armies, ballistic missiles, and border outposts.
Trillions of dollars. But in the unbroken timeline, that existential militarized border doesn't exist. There is no decades-long arms race.
Right.
Which means those billions and billions of dollars are freed up. And we aren't just talking about a one-time stimulus check.
Yeah.
We are talking about the compounding interest of redirecting a massive chunk of a nation's GDP into human capital for 80 straight years.
That is the crucial mechanic. It is the compounding effect of reallocation. Imagine taking the budget required to maintain a nuclear arsenal and redirecting it entirely into public health infrastructure in the 1960s and 70s.
Hard to even fathom.
Imagine taking the billions spent on border militarization and pouring it into a sprawling continent-wide network of research universities and technology incubators.
The technological trajectory changes completely. With that kind of unburdened capital, a unified subcontinent wouldn't just be an economic player. They would be driving global innovation. You would see massively expanded, incredibly ambitious space programs. You'd likely see pioneering advancements in green energy and biotechnology. And simply because the brightest minds of 1.8 billion people are engineering solutions for human progress, rather than engineering better ways to defend a contested border.
It completely redefines the ceiling of human potential in the region. But for all the talk of space programs and macroeconomics, we really cannot lose sight of the foundation of this analysis.
Right. The people.
Always the people. The most profound takeaway from analyzing this unbroken map isn't the GDP or the supply chains. It is forcing ourselves to recognize how many individual, highly personal stories were permanently rewritten by a single political decision in 1947.
Yeah. How many lifelong friendships would have existed that never even had the chance?
Yeah.
How many collaborative businesses were never founded? How many families were severed? And how many lives would have taken an entirely different, perhaps unimaginably prosperous path if the stroke of a pen hadn't literally divided their world?
This raises an important question about how we view history itself. When we engage in these deep dives into alternate timelines, we aren't just marveling at what could have been.
No, it's deeper than that.
We are exposing the fragility of our own reality. The present world we navigate every single day wasn't inevitable. It was actively constructed by the choices, the fears, and the political compromises of flawed human beings.
And that is exactly why this deep dive matters to you, listening right now. Alternate history is a vital tool. It shakes us out of the complacency of thinking that the way things are is the way they always had to be.
Very well said.
Understanding how a single decision to draw a line on a map in 1947 rippled out to dictate the fate of space programs,
Yeah.
the flow of global trade, and the deeply held identities of almost 2 billion people. It gives you a profound respect for the weight of choices.
History isn't something that just happens to us. It is something we are actively building.
Which brings us to the final thought we want to leave you with today. If a literal, physical line drawn by a cartographer 80 years ago could so completely dictate the economic reality and the generational trauma of a fifth of the world's population today, I want you to take a hard look at the world we are living in right now. Look at the invisible lines, the social borders, the ideological and digital divisions that we are actively drawing, debating, and enforcing in our own societies today. Which of those lines are we casually accepting right now, today, that are going to completely rewrite the reality of generations 80 years from now?